This is Margaret from the blog Don't Call It Bollywood, and this is my weekly box office post. The box office this week is kind of not very interesting, which is what's in fact interesting about it. Everything's dropping off as you would expect. In America, Secret Superstar, Itafaq, and Tumhari Sulu are still doing decent business. Theaters are probably breaking even. They've dropped off a lot faster in basically everywhere else. Only America is really still interested in them. And Gomal Again and some of the other earlier, more big, splashy, fun releases are also dropping off in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, where they were initially doing well. This is sort of a natural global pattern. The global audience is not identical for Indian film. The American audience tends to go for more what I think of as Amir Khan films. A little more thought-provoking, there's a social message in there somewhere, and so on and so forth. The UK audience goes for what I think of as Yash Chopra films. Sentimental, overly colorful, big songs, that kind of thing. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they go for what I think of as Punjabi films. Action films, simple storylines, action scenes, big bright colors, that sort of thing. It's not really clear distinctions all the time. For instance, Gomal Again, while not technically an action film, did well in all of the Punjabi action film belts because it had that feel to it. One-liners, fun images, the kind of thing you can go to with your 3-year-old son and he will get a real big fun kick out of it. And then there's films like Tumhari Sulu, which may not technically be considered a social message film. It's more sort of a lightweight family drama kind of thing, but it does fall within that same feeling. Dil Dhadakne Do would be a better example. Technically more of a rom-com than anything else, but the way it was filmed and the way it was performed falls within that same Amir Khan thought-provoking dynamic, so it did very well in America, but not in other places. Part of these definitions, by the way, it's not just me. This is based on an interview I read from Karan Johar a few years back, which was the first time that I went, oh, that's true. Not every country is the same when you look at the global market. And Karan broke it down in a similar fashion, which is where I started looking into these things. So this is just a known thing. The global market isn't identical. The key to the Indian market in general being healthy, global and local, because remember, the Indian market isn't identical either. You've got urban versus rural, and you've also got the different regions all have different things that they look for in a movie. The key is 3 or 4 times a year, you have one really big film that will bring together all parts of the market. And then in between, you have a variety of other films coming out that will hit some parts of the market. That's what's going to keep people overseas going in to see Indian movies if they know, okay, 3 times a year there's going to be a big thing that I will love, and then at least once a month there'll be something else that I'll enjoy. That's what's going to keep them coming back to Indian films and keep those Indian film theaters open overseas. And the same is kind of true within India. You need to have that nice mixture because every market has its own thing. So every market has its own theater owner. He doesn't care if the movie that's coming out did really well in a different state. He needs a movie that's going to do well in his state. And he needs a movie like that to come out once a month or so. But at the same time, you also need those big blockbuster all India hits at least once or twice a year so that all the theaters will be equally happy at the same time and you can do all India promotions and you can have this sense of global unity, essentially. I remember back when Bahubali 2 came out, I realized that the first show times where I was were at 2:30 in the afternoon because that was exactly 1 minute after midnight India time. Literally the entire world was seeing Bahubali 2 for the first time at the exact same moment. And that's a rare thing to have that kind of a film. Not super rare though. The key is to make sure that it does come out at regular intervals. And this year, we've been struggling a bit with that. Tubelight, that was supposed to be the big film that was going to recover the losses from over Eid and keep people going for the next couple of months until the next big movie came out at Diwali. It didn't really work because Tubelight failed horribly. Jab Hari Met Sejal, thank goodness, rearranged its release schedule so that it was carefully released not to be that big film. Maybe the promotions made it sound that way, but if you look at the release date, it was snuggled in between Mubarakan on one side and Toilet Ekprem Kata, I think, on the other side. There were two decently sized films coming out with it. It wasn't going to dominate every screen. It wasn't set up to be the profit margin for an entire quarter of a movie theater. Tubelight was supposed to be that, and then this other batch of movies was coming out later. Diwali was a bit odd this year as well. Golmaal again, yes, it was a good, solid hit film, but it wasn't the massive, massive hit, and it wasn't, again, positioned to be a massive, massive hit. It was a solid, family-friendly film with Secret Superstar opening opposite it for a slightly different kind of an audience. That was actually a good weekend, I think, because between the two movies, that covered pretty much the whole audience. It wasn't bad. But the point is, there was nothing planned between Diwali and Padmavati, which I'm realizing more and more as I'm looking at the box office. Last week, the week before last, that was actually really great. The Diwali releases were dropping off, we're taking fewer screens. This was the pocket for interesting smaller films to release and find their audience, their segment of the audience. And that's good. You need that pocket in between major releases. But now we're coming out of that pocket. Everybody expected Padmavati to be this Friday, so nobody was planning to release anything opposite it, big or small, and all the things that are already out have pretty much used up their smaller audience that they were planning for. And I don't think there's anything really big that's being moved around to come out to replace Padmavati at this point. There's Ferengi coming up, but that's more of a niche market kind of thing. I don't see that as being super massive. And then everybody else is kind of scared of Tiger Zindahay at the end of the month. This is not good. Ignoring everything else that has to do with Padmavati, this extremely last-minute shifting of the release date is very unhealthy for the industry because nobody was planning for it. There's smaller movies that could have benefited from coming out this weekend and weren't given the option because they didn't know this weekend would be open. There's other bigger movies that probably could have been moved up and rearranged so that there would be less of a gap right now. And they didn't know either, so they're, all by themselves somewhere else. Talash, I believe, also released the first week in December. I may be wrong about that, but that would be an example. Perhaps if December 1st had been open all along, Amir would have moved Secret Superstar to December 1st, and Golmaal again would have had Diwali all to itself, which wouldn't have been bad. Golmaal again could have increased its distribution, increased its publicity, and really swept the audience. Secret Superstar could have found a nice little nook of having 3 open weeks before Tiger Zindahay comes out. December's always good for Amir, and so on and so forth. That's just one example of the way all of this could have been rearranged if we had been aware that there'd be an open weekend. But what's happening now is all the movies that have already come out are dropping lower and lower and lower in their box office, and there's nothing really exciting coming out for the next 3 weeks. Tiger Zindahay is almost guaranteed to be a massive hit, of the kind you need, a massive, everywhere it plays good kind of hit. But that's not going to completely make up for having 3 empty weeks before that. 3 weeks where people start to look elsewhere for entertainment and get frustrated with not having anything new. So ignoring this empty Friday, I actually think Padmavati's new rumored release date in February is very healthy for all of these same reasons. I didn't like that Padmavati was coming out December 1st and Tiger Zindahay was coming out December 22nd. Padmavati felt like the kind of film that could breathe for a bit. It could probably have handled more than 3 weeks as being the only game in town. It probably could have done a lot better running for 4 or 6 weeks. To me, that felt kind of short-sighted, a little bit of a, well, we've done good in December before, let's stick with it even if there's something else coming out, instead of taking a moment to step back and say, I think we'd do better if we waited till a time when there was no other competition and we had a free run. Tiger Zindahay, I wouldn't necessarily expect to move because you really do need a Christmas week release. And it's a good Christmas week this year. Christmas is on a Monday, so there's that whole weekend leading up to Christmas and then the Christmas holiday week for people to go to the movies. So Tiger Zindahay had to stay there. It can't move back last minute. But Padmavati really should not have taken December 1st to begin with. It should have given us a planned opening Diwali to Christmas, just like there usually is. And then taking February, that's really good because February is usually kind of open. There's the big Christmas movie, and then maybe there's a big Republic Day movie in January. Valentine's Day tends to be a little bit smaller in February, and then you go right into cricket season and everything drops off. So a big movie that people will see just to see the movie, even if it doesn't come out on a holiday, is exactly what needs to happen in February. And then it'll have a free run for repeat viewing as long as needed all the way through the spring. So that was a lot of talking about stuff that isn't happening this week. Sorry about that. It's just like I said, what actually did happen this week is really dull. Everything's dropping off as you would expect it to drop off, which is what makes my mind drift to thinking about, well, what could have happened? What should have happened? You can feel free to agree with me or disagree with me or anything at all. Just leave me a comment on my blog. There's a link in the comment right below. Thanks. Bye.